Thank you, Regina. Friends, colleagues, my gratitude for the organizers for giving us this remarkable opportunity to look back in order to move forward. In doing so, I want to raise three questions. What have we learned about the evolution of abortion laws, that is, laws relating to abortion? What rights, laws, and ethical norms need improving, need strengthening, need applying? What have we done well, and what might we do better? The purpose of my talk is to share my tentative thoughts on answering these questions, respecting that you will have different answers and that our answers will evolve over this remarkable conference. So what have we learned about laws affecting abortion services and its criminality? We've learned that there are many different kinds of laws: criminal laws, human rights, and constitutional laws, and administrative laws, perhaps increasingly most importantly. They all play a role, both negative and positive, ensuring the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality of services. So with the criminal law, there are many rationales for criminalizing abortion, and it's important to understand these rationales if we are going to dialogue with those who think differently than we do. So the rationales for criminalizing abortion can be women-centered, sex-centered, or fetal-centered. The woman-focused rationales, in theory, are set up to protect women from unsafe practices. And they're also used to deter women, to punish women for gender nonconforming practices, gender nonconforming conduct, namely avoiding or delaying motherhood. The sex-focused rationales include the need to threaten punishment of women or girls for non-procreative sex, completely ignoring that sex and sexual intimacy is an important part of life. The fetal-focused rationales include the importance of protecting prenatal life from the moment of conception through punishment of abortion service providers, and often women and those seeking abortion. Completely ignoring that the fetal focus, we can protect the fetus from the moment of conception in many ways that are consistent with women's rights. The principles of criminal law, we need to think better. We need to think together about how we can use some of these principles, such as only using the criminal law as the last resort, as we've learned from the recent Brazilian and Colombian decisions. But when it comes to women, the criminal law is used as the first resort. So we need to mobilize our criminal law thinkers, our criminal law architects, to show us better how to use some of these principles of criminal law. In terms of the trends of criminal law reform, we've seen the depenalization, the liberalization, and finally, the decriminalization. We can find sources for depenalization, that is, withdrawing punishment from pregnant women, in the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women in its General Recommendation 24, which calls for the complete depenalization. We can also see efforts to liberalize, to extend grounds for abortion. But we know that extending grounds for abortion, yes, while an important step, has its limitations, because these grounds for abortion are rarely applied equally because of the prejudice and biases often of healthcare providers against pregnant women. We've seen calls for decriminalization of abortion, particularly in the WHO abortion care guideline that came out last year. Its first recommendation is that abortion should be fully decriminalized. Now, the abortion care guidelines, the executive summary is out in Spanish on the WHO website, but I understand that the complete guideline will be out next month. This is an absolutely remarkable document. It's now the gold standard, and we need to work together to vernacularize this document in many, many different ways. Finally, human rights and constitutional law. We've seen the rationales for constitutionalizing abortion in many different court decisions, and they include the public health rationale, the autonomy and privacy rationale, and most recently, the gender equality rationale. We've seen remarkable reports that have contextualized and named the harms, fact-finding reports, such as one most recently from Human Rights Watch. They've named the gendered harms and other harms of restrictive abortion laws. They've exposed the disproportionate impact of these laws on marginalized groups. These fact-finding reports have been game changers in many different countries. We've also learned that we need to protect both individual and collective rights. Individual rights, for example, the right to the security of the person, the right to women's conscience, the right of women to call their soul their own. And here, I want to give a shout out to the Colombian Supreme Court decision, Constitutional Court decision of last year. That was one of the first decisions to recognize that women too have rights of conscience, rights to call their soul their own. Collective rights, we're moving towards understanding the importance of collective rights. Individual rights are often thought of as negative rights, thou shalt not rights. Collective rights are often thought of as positive rights, what states need to do to protect these rights, such as the rights to the benefits of scientific progress, meaning ensuring the availability, accessibility and acceptability and quality of medical products. We've recognized that all of these rights need to be exercised on the basis of non-discrimination and equality. Going forward, we need to make sure that we do a better job on narratives around equality. Sex equality, racial equality, disability equality, and age equality. So we need to mobilize thinking because courts and our narratives tend to be a bit too superficial around equality. Finally, administrative laws and regulations concerning the availability, accessibility, acceptability, and quality. All of those laws that affect the practice of medicine, the practice of nursing, the practice of pharmacy, telemedicine, telehealth, and most recently, self-managed abortion. Those laws that affect the delivery and coverage of abortion services, those laws that affect the dispensing and the prescription of therapeutic and essential drugs. Let me give a shout out to this very important report that Clacai will be launching at this meeting, Laws and Its Shadows. I love that title, Laws and Its Shadows, analyzing in 16 countries the delivery of services. We have much to learn from this study, and I look forward to hearing more about it. In terms of availability of services, we've recognized that services, the shifting nature of the delivery of services. Scholarship and the WHO guidelines explains there's a spectrum of services within and outside the clinical context, and they all have a role to play in ensuring equal access. We need to map the gaps in service delivery and looking at some of the important governmental reports that have done this. For example, I can proudly say that the Canadian report of long ago identified the gaps, the unfairness of the delivery of our services that led our Supreme Court to say that our restrictive abortion law is unfair to women, denies them their security of the person, denies them their liberty. The WHO guidelines says very specifically that medical abortion is an essential drug. It's not a noxious thing. It's not poison, as many laws would have us believe. We need to look at some of these developments, especially in the WHO guidelines that characterize abortion as a therapeutic, as an essential drug. In terms of accessibility, let me stress here the importance of the WHO guidelines that underscores the need to ensure non-discriminatory and equal access to abortion services. But when have we asked what makes discrimination wrongful? What makes discrimination wrongful? Ask yourself that question. Ask your colleagues that question. It's a very tough question. But we do have some answers in the CEDAW General Recommendation 24. Criminalizing abortion that only women need is a form of discrimination. What makes abortion wrongful could be also the way the law is structured to subordinate women. What makes discrimination intersectional? We'll hear more about that during the conference. But the CEDAW General Recommendation 28 says that intersecting forms of discrimination, such as on grounds of pregnant status, such as adolescent age, health status, and disability, and their compounded nature have a negative impact, and that is a form of discrimination that specifically needs to be addressed. What makes discrimination systemic? What makes discrimination systemic? The CEDAW Inquiry Report on Abortion in Northern Ireland gives us some clues. It says that systemic discrimination stems from the deliberate retention of restrictive abortion laws. Finally, in terms of acceptability of services, they include that we must respect medical ethics. And here's where we could do a much better job of looking at medical ethics and how they are understood and used at the clinical and service delivery level. We have reports, important scholarship that shows that understanding the patriarchal nature of the delivery of services can affect how medical ethics is used and how it is trained. Ethical guidelines in the WHO abortion care guideline all stress the importance of protection of confidentiality, the accommodation of conscience with limitations, and the elimination of harmful stereotyping. These guidelines we need to vernacularize, we need to use, we need to make them our own. We need to get on those committees that develop these ethical guidelines, whether it's medical professional associations, whether it's nursing associations, or pharmacists. But ethics are a language that this group needs to use far more creatively. Finally, in terms of equality of services, I quote, "Women are entitled to access to quality-assured medicines." Quality-assured medicines. So let me end where I began. I've given you some clues about what we have learned about laws, what laws and ethical norms need to be strengthened. But let me end with a plea to continue to work as a team. We've done a remarkable job to develop these teams, but we need to continue to strengthen our teams. We need to learn how to play to each other's strength, because the going is getting tougher and our teams need to be stronger. Thank you.